In the late 1940s, the concept of FM radio was just in the beginning stages. AM radio had already been established, and it had already made its way into many homes. But the sound of AM was often muffled with static, and it was sometimes difficult to listen to, especially during weather storms. So pioneers set out to find a better quality of sound that offered static-free reception. What they later introduced was FM radio, and towns across the country were stepping up to capture this concept and bring it into their own town. Newark, Ohio was one of them.
I had returned from World War II, and I think April 1st of 1946. I've always been concerned about that. I was afraid they might call me back and it was an April Fool's joke. But at any rate, about a year later, a friend of mine who had been a high school chum called me from Columbus. He and I had gone to some evening, what they called twilight school at Ohio State University prior to going into the war. And we took, of all things, radio script writing and acting. And so we had had a little taste of writing scripts and working in front of a microphone with an instructor. And then we went off to war, and 3.5 years later, something like that, he called me and said he was working at WCOL in Columbus. His name was Gene Regal. And Gene said he was coming to Newark to be program director and assistant general manager of a new FM station called WCLT. And did I want to come along? And I had been working for the Pure Oil Company and was not really too happy with the way things were going there. So I said yes, came over and met my future boss, Tom Rogers. Tom's wife was, maiden name was Spencer. And her brothers and her father originally started out, they owned the Newark Advocate, and at some point in the late 30s or early 40s, they must have gone to a national convention of newspaper publishers. And someone there talked about this brand new communications idea that was sweeping the country, and that licenses were available. If they were smart, they would start snapping them up. And that's exactly what happened.
In July of 1947, WCLT made its debut and went on the air for the first time. It was powered with 3,000 watts with an affected radiated power of 8,500 watts. But because FM radio was a fairly new concept, stores in WCLT's listening area had not begun to sell FM radio units. This meant that WCLT could only be heard by people who owned a pilot tuner, an instrument that converted AM signal to FM. Once radio manufacturers realized that FM radio was on the rise, they came out with the first FM radios to be sold in stores across America. And because WCLT was owned by the local newspaper business, the Newark Advocate, the paper offered free advertising to stores who offered these new FM units. Meanwhile, WCLT had applied for an AM station and was granted a license to run on 1430 AM. It aired for the first time 3 years after FM made its debut. At the time, most homes already owned units that could play the AM signal, and it was still more familiar to the public than FM. The new AM station allowed WCLT to sell more commercials to help their new FM station stay alive and be able to pay the bills while FM was still being realized. So now, WCLT had a presence in the form of amplitude modulation on 1430 AM and a presence in the form of frequency modulation at 100.3 FM.
FM is a higher frequency. We're at 100.3, that's 100 megahertz. And AM is 1430, that's 1.4 megahertz, much lower frequency. FM, we get great quality, we have stereo. WCLT never experimented with the AM stereo, which is still out there. AM was originally thought to be superior to FM. That was the original scheme for broadcasting, was AM, and then FM came later. And part of that was because of the legs, or how much coverage you could get with a lower power than you could on FM. But you know, FM had the fidelity and the better quality, and course, you mentioned static free, which also was a plus.
As with any new concept or business in its early stages, WCLT had to suffer some bumps and bruises along the way, but one major bump took them by surprise.
We hadn't been on the air a year, I don't believe, till we had a big windstorm. And in the middle of that windstorm, we lost our tower. Happened in the afternoon around 3 o'clock or so. And the wind was blowing very, very strong. And we had had some rattling and groaning around outside, but we were still on the air. And Gene Regal and I ran to the back door just to check and see on the tower. And at that time, our receptionist called out. She was looking out the front. And she said, the tower came down. And we couldn't believe it, Gene and I, and we called back to her. No, the tower didn't come down, Freddie, it's all right. And we're still trying to get out the door, and we couldn't get out so we could literally look over and see. And we're still pushing the door and telling her it's all right, and the voice came back and said, but I can see it out front. And at that point, we dropped the door idea and ran out front, and sure enough, it had come down and just missed the west corner of the building, fell across the driveway, and laid down the hillside. The hillside at that time was the home to about 13,000 one-foot tall pine seedlings that Tom Rogers and Ben Wendell and some others had planted in 1946, and on that hillside, in all of that shale, that was a lot of tough work. But you can see those trees out there today, 50 and 60 feet tall and more, and they were all what's left from that planting of 46. The tower fell down among them. It was in the afternoon, the storm abated, and that evening yet, quit raining, sky was fairly clear, and people started coming up the hill in droves. And they walked up the hill, and they parked their cars at the edge of the drive, and they were in. Everyone was looking at the tower, and they were going down the hillside to examine it, and kids were running back and forth, and our chief engineer, Ben Wendell, was beside himself because he also was our insurance agent, and he had the tower and the property insured. And he said, if one of those kids slips and hurts himself, they'll sue you right out of the newspaper before it's over. And we tried to get sheriff's deputies out here to patrol the place, keep the people away from it, because it was a dangerous thing to be fooling around. That went at 3 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, we were back on the air. Ben and one of his friends, Walt McConnell, came out and they undid the top bay of the antenna, which is now laying on the ground, carried it back up, got on the roof, strapped it to the chimney up there, and tightened it up and hooked it up. And although we didn't have near the power we should have, after all, this little ring was only about 8 feet above the chimney instead of 360 feet in the air. Excuse me. But we did have a signal, and we did broadcast yet that night. And we kept on that way. The next day, we got the power company to come out and put in a telephone pole right out back behind the building, and we put the tower, the ring, back up on it. Now we had 60 feet and a little bit better signal, and we had to work with that for a while Tom Rogers and Ben Wendell went out on the market and tried to find another tower. And they located one that had been built for a television station, and then they had gone broke, didn't have the money to pay for it, and it was laying over in Indiana at a factory where they made these things. It was 480 feet tall. We bought the bottom 370 feet of it because that's all we could use, and they sold that to us, and it came over. And the first tower was four-legged. It was built by Schuler Engineering, which is a local concern here who built high tension towers for power lines, as you see going across the countryside. That's a big difference. Those things are about 150 feet tall. This thing's twice that high, and it was really not anything they had much experience in. But they put it up, and when it went down, part of the reason was because it was angular steel. And with the forelegs and the right angles on the metal going up, the wind started whipping around it, creating a vortex, and just the tower literally started to rotate and spin, and finally one leg pulled out of the ground. It was only in a very small piece of concrete, about not much bigger than a punching bag, poured in the ground, and this thing bolted on the top of it. And down it went. Station in Worcester had the same tower, built with the same company, and as I recall, it fell down the day they opened the station and went on the air. So the same tower had a problem that way too. I don't remember the details exactly, but that was the station, and it did fall down right after they got the station ready to go on the air. The tower weighed about 40,000 pounds. The one we bought was a three-legged tubular tower, the one we have now, and it weighed 80,000 pounds. So we doubled the weight of the structure. It was three legs, it was tubular, so that the wind could slip through it much easier and not build up a vortex. And the first tower had been wind loaded. They said it was tested for 95 miles an hour, and we had a 96 mile an hour wind, and down she went. This one is wind tested to 150 mile an hour wind. And each leg in the tower we have now is embedded into a 10-foot cube of concrete under each leg, so that you've got a very solid base, and then a formed bit of concrete coming up that's steel and concrete that levels off, and then the base plates are fitted and bolted right into it. Very solid thing, but we were months before that thing arrived, and we got it put up and got back to our full power. That happened in, as I say, the very early days of the station. One of the things that we missed, and you can see it when you look out front, is the reason there is a gap in the skyline, and you can see down to the center of town from our front windows, is because people pulled up 300 or 400 of those small pine trees and carried them away with them when they were down examining the tower down the hillside. So,
among several notable people who helped WCLT to emerge in those early days, Ben Wendell was the station's chief engineer. Bob Pricer was the station's continuity writer, also known as the station's script writer. Tom Rogers played the role of general manager, and Gene Regal played the role of program director. However, there was one person who stood out among them. Her name was Mae Jackson.
we had a lady that was called our music librarian, and very quickly it became Mae Jackson, who then stayed with us for some 30 years, and she ended up being our receptionist and our secretary and the real brains of the outfit, because I know if I was out of town and called back to find out what was going on, she would tell me, and then she'd tell me what she'd done, and she had done just exactly what I would have done, and maybe faster. She really was a remarkable person. But started out, she was learning the business just like we did. And so she would take these sheets of paper and stack them in sequence so that she knew, and we made a log, a music log, that said what was going to be on at 2 o'clock, what was on at 2:30, 2:45, and so forth. And then she would gather all of these scripts, put them in sequence, and then the scripts would also say, you'll need disc C, cut 11. So she would look for disc C and put it in a standing rack. Next song, if it was disc 22, she'd pick it and put it behind it. So she would prepare the music, big discs, in the same sequence as the music. And so we took them into the studio and set them down beside the announcer and the microphone. He would pull the disc and put it on this turntable or one on the other side, and he would have it what we called queued up. He would flip a switch so he could hear it in his earphone, and he would wind it until he heard the music start, and back at half a turn and stop. And when it was time to play it, you would hit the motor, and within a half a turn it would hit the proper 78 RPM speed, which was what we were using for most of the things. However, for the recurrent discs were all 78s that were coming out at that time. But the music library actually was played on 33 1/3 speed, much like the hi-fi selections later. Big difference. The selections on these libraries, you cued from the inside of the track and it played to the outside instead of normally put it at the outside and letting it work its way to the middle. So you just, why it worked that way, I don't know, but that's what happened.
In the years that followed these early days, changes in technology and the broadcasting world has had quite an effect on WCLT and the equipment that they have used to broadcast from. Though most of the changes have offered a significant better sound and quality, the changes still continue to develop today. Some of the equipment used to broadcast throughout the years includes equipment like wire recorders, reel-to-reel players, cart machines, discs, different sizes of vinyl records, tape recorders, CD players, and now computerized media has set the stage for the next big craze yet to come. In 1963, WCLT became an affiliate of the Associated Press, which gave them first-hand access to news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across the world. In 1968, the FM station known today as T100 went to stereo, and the Federal Communications Commission granted them 50,000 watts of power, the highest power any station can legally run, because they were one of the first pioneer stations in Central Ohio. Meanwhile, WCLT had become an affiliate of the Indians Radio Network and was airing all the Indians games live on the AM station. Later they became affiliated with, and even yet today still run all of the live games for Ohio State football, Ohio State basketball, and the Columbus Blue Jackets hockey team. WCLT was eventually sold by the Spencers, and the family only had one person in mind who they wanted to acquire it. Since Bob Pricer had been with the station since the early days, the Spencers offered the sale to him before anyone else. Bob wasn't sure why they had made this decision, but he was honored, and after a quick check to see if he would be able to pay for it, he accepted their offer. Since then, Bob Pricer has carried on WCLT's tradition of catering to the listeners and the local community. What most people don't know today is that WCLT has not always played country music as its format. It has actually played several formats throughout the years.
When WCLT FM went on the air first, it was a traditional FM beautiful music station, and it had evolved over the years into an AC station, adult contemporary, and then into a hot AC station or a soft rock station. And that's where we were in the 80s. The end of the 80s, my father suggested, hey, we're coming into a new decade, we're approaching the end of the century, and he said, I think we want to have a market research project done. So Bob was the initiator of the process. We contacted a man by the name of Mark Kassoff out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, who had done a lot of great work for the National Association of Broadcasters, and that's how Bob was aware of him. Mr. Kassoff came down, did a market study for us, and presented the results just prior to Christmas 1989. And I'll never forget, we had the big meeting down in our conference room in the basement, and the big joke among the management team at that time was, well, we'll do anything but country. So when the presentation was finished and Mr. Kassoff said, and you will be known as T100 Newark's own country FM, everybody's jaw dropped. And at that point, Bob and I decided, not knowing anything about country music, we needed to make our first pilgrimage to Nashville. So we headed south, went down to the CRS, which is the Country Radio Seminar, country radio, we soon discovered, is very much a fraternity. People very willing to talk to us and educate us, and it's the only radio format that has its own seminar, the Country Radio Seminar out of Nashville. So we educated ourselves, we got ready, and on February 1st, 1990, we pulled the plug and went to country, and things really blossomed. Mark Kassoff's research hit a home run. He identified that while WCLT-FM was a station that everybody used, nobody loved. And what we did, we left all of our key programming elements in place, including the original DJs, and just replaced the soft rock adult contemporary music with country. Because his whole premise was, people, you own the information image, the community image, the news image, the sports image, the weather image, but you have no musical identity, nothing that anyone loves. There's no passion. So he said, leave all those elements in place and add country music, which at that time 39% of the Licking County audience was interested in, which was the largest musical segment in the county. So that's literally what we did. We left the station in place, we left the original call letters, and all we did was add country music. And we caught the Garth Brooks wave, and away we went. Listenership went through the roof. Sales increased dramatically. It was a very positive move all the way around for WCLT.
I started here in March of 1989, and at that time we were an adult contemporary station. Started as an account executive in the sales department. Business was not great. It was steady, but obviously could be better. There was word going around that the Pricers, the owner of the station, was thinking about doing a format change. In February, actually February 5th of 1990, they decided to go country. We, that had been part of the station for a while, were very nervous about it, weren't sure that it was going to be a good idea, but as we say now, boy, they hit a grand slam.
Well, when T100 switched to country, the response was phenomenal. We've had maybe a few calls about, hey, why are you doing this, why are you playing this country stuff? But the vast, overwhelming majority of calls we had, and there were a ton of them, were so positive that, in fact, I was astounded beyond my beliefs what we would receive in response when we turned country. The phones were ringing all day long, and 95%, I'd say almost 98% of the respondents were, hey, we're glad you're country, we love it, we love it, we love it. And it was one of the most exciting things that I had ever experienced in my professional career in radio. I mean, the response was almost immediate, and it just blossomed into a beautiful change for the radio station.
Well, the research proved that, you know what, country music is what people want. And it just went gangbusters for WCLT. And it went so much, and you look at the Arbitron ratings out of Columbus, which is what we are measured by, WCLT and T100, they were a top 10 radio station in the Columbus market by making that switch to country music. And of course now, you know, the market's very, very competitive, but you know, we're right around number 12 or 13 in the market. I mean, if we take Licking County, Knox, Muskingum, even Coshocton and some of the surrounding counties, we have right now in 2006, 86,900 listeners every quarter hour, which is awesome. And then just in Licking County alone, which is our home base, we have around 31,000 plus listeners, and that tends to vary, you know, from Arbitron book to Arbitron book. The 80,000 plus listeners that I'm talking about is generated from listeners in Licking County, Knox County, Coshocton, Perry, Muskingum County, kind of a total survey area of central Ohio. And we break it down in county because of where we are located. Some of those western counties on the other side of Columbus aren't really a factor for us. That's not what we're going for. We're targeting the more east side of Columbus, Licking County, and east as far as Zanesville. As far as the mileage, as far as where the station goes, signal strength wise, I can only give you the experiences. In driving to Dayton, I'll listen to us all the way to Springfield, Ohio. I go north, I'll listen to us all the way to my hometown of Shreve, Ohio, which Worcester, Ohio is in, and we can hear as far as Worcester. And I've listened to the station all the way to Canton. I mean, so we get out there, and a lot of times if I'm heading out of town, going to Florida or wherever, I'll listen to us all the way down to the West Virginia line. So yeah, I mean, so you can see the area that the signal covers is tremendous.
Many people believe that WCLT has positioned Newark, Ohio on the map. And throughout the years, Bob Pricer and his family has utilized WCLT to help the community stay informed about everything from local and national events to local emergencies, including weather, farming information, charity events, and much more. WCLT has been an extremely useful tool for local advertisers, and the Central Ohio community is certainly better off because of WCLT, the Pricer family, and their continued support of this community.
Hi, I'm Darlene Callison, and I'm with Elves in Action for the Needy. And I'm here tonight to say thank you to WCLT T100 for helping Elves in Action for the Needy for the last 16 years. We've been very fortunate in Licking County to have folks like the Pricer family, i.e. Doug Pricer, Bob Pricer, and of course Dottie Pricer, helping organizations like Elves in Action for the Needy and the Food Pantry Network of Licking County. When I think about all the help that's been given to our organization and others like it, I don't know what we would do without the fine generosity of the Pricer family. It's been just absolutely awesome working with the Pricers. When I think about the years that have passed, one of the things that we think about is I recall the first year that we did Elves in Action for the Needy, we walked in and we talked to Doug Pricer about different things that he thought we should do to try to get this thing started. And he gave us such sound advice from all of the wisdom that he had in working with nonprofit organizations here in Licking County and other organizations like it. The advice that he gave us, while it didn't always come through maybe that first year or the second year, in years past, it came through at one time or another. The advice that he gave us always paid off. And I'd like to just thank the Pricer family for all the help that they've given organizations like Elves in Action for the Needy, the Food Pantry Network of Licking County, and other organizations like it. And of course the Red Cross. I don't know what we would have done without the T100 station and WCLT during these last couple of years. It's been very, very difficult. And the Pricer family once again hung in there with us and gave us a lot of support on the station by doing an auction with us and also taking us to area restaurants and things like that, doing all sorts of fundraisers and things like that for the organization. Again, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you. We thank you very much for all the help that you've given the nonprofits.
I'll say this, Bob Pricer has been one of the most influential and caring, giving, loving individuals that the Newark area has, since I've been here, and I've been here since '57, one of the most caring and giving individuals that this area has had, bar none. There are so many things that he has done that nobody will ever know about. He is 100% behind this community and has obviously served on the Newark School Board and the Licking Memorial Hospital Board. I'm only mentioning two, and there are, I'm sure, dozens others. I helped start the Newark Heath Rotary Club when there was a need found that they needed to have another Rotary Club in the area here. He helped to start and develop the Newark Heath Rotary Club. His contributions to the community are just too numerous to mention in a short segment. One of the other things that Bob does, he likes for everybody at the radio station to be involved in the community. I'm a member of a service club. I'd say at least 75% of our people that work here are members of service clubs throughout the area. That is one thing that Bob has stressed, that hey, we're a local radio station, we have to be involved in the community. So he's got most of the employees here involved in the community via a service club or another service organization of some kind, be it Red Cross, Goodwill, United Way. We've had several people from our radio station that have served in different capacities for the United Way. Bob has served as, I believe, president of the United Way at one time. His son Doug, who now is our president and general manager, has served as president of the United Way. The Easter Seals Cake Auction, which this radio station started back in the 80s, Bob, of course, behind it 100%, was out there in the community with our mobile unit, with all of our remote equipment, broadcasting live from, I believe the first one was held at the Sheraton in downtown Newark, now called the Inn off the Square, or Inn on the Square. And Bob had our mobile unit down there and the whole staff, and we got that rolling way back when. And that was an event that lasted for, I'd say, 15 plus years, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think the first one we did benefited Easter Seals, and then when Easter Seals kind of moved out of the area, we moved on to other organizations that benefited from that live cake auction we used to do. The cake auction, we would request area celebrities, dignitaries, and businesses to bake cakes, and then we would auction them off live on the air. the whole premise behind it being, if it's a business like, let's say, a Licking Memorial Hospital or an Owens Corning Fiberglass or a Park National Bank, to get a big cake and bring it down, and we would call in bids. In the meantime, the employees at those businesses would collect funds to buy back that particular cake. Cakes would go anywhere, believe it or not, for $1,000. I think the highest bid we ever had on one was somewhere above $3,000. And then that money would go towards, as I said, it benefited Easter Seals to begin with, and then Easter Seals kind of left this area, and it benefited after that several different community organizations throughout the area.
In July 2007, WCLT will celebrate 60 years of on-air service to Central Ohio. Who knows what kind of impacts WCLT will have in the future? Certainly, it will remain a central communication point for thousands of fans and listeners who listen in every day. And if the future is any indication of the past, we shall see great things to come.
Well, here's the future of WCLT Radio, is it'll continue to provide local service. The people there still seem to want it. As long as they want it, they'll provide it. And they'll still be here, whether it's in AM, FM, HD, streaming audio, whatever the form is. As long as the local presence and local news and information is wanted by the public, they'll provide it. So that's the future, and I don't see that ending. All right, this is the transmitter room. I'm talking really loud. This is the transmitter room, no admittance. We have our FM, our AM, and our HD, which just came today at 9 a.m. Will be installed over the next couple of weeks. And let's take a look at it. This is the room where it all happens. This is the AM transmitter. This is the current FM right here, the FM 25K, and soon to be a backup transmitter to the new HD transmitter, which still has the tags on it. And that'll be the future.